everyone, this is Emma with the Spirit Keepers. Over the past few years, I have really wanted to create some kind of Christmas tradition with this channel. And I decided to bring back an old Christmas tradition from the Victorian era. During Victorian times, on Christmas Eve, people used to tell ghost stories. And it's actually the one that inspired the Charles Dickens book, The Christmas Carol. And it was based off of this Victorian tradition. So I thought, you know what? We're a ghost hunting channel. Why not do a ghost story every year on Christmas Eve and have it come out on Christmas Eve? So this is that video. I haven't had that many videos where I just kind of sit and, tell anyone about myself. And, I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to talk about some of my paranormal experiences. Today, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to tell you the story. This is kind of going to be a long story, but about the first paranormal encounter I ever had. It was with a ghost in my house, the house I grew up in, and the activity and the experience lasts about 1.5 to 2 years. So there's a lot to discuss. There was a lot going on in my house. So yeah, if you don't believe in ghosts and you're a skeptic, I totally get where you're coming from. If you don't believe me, I totally get where you're coming from. If you believe me, that's great. If not, hopefully you can at least enjoy this video and enjoy the ride. So without further ado, I'm going to tell you the story of my first ghost experience ever. And just before we get into what happened, I just want to preface this by saying that the house that I grew up in was like a brand new house when my family and I moved into it. So there were no families that had lived there before I lived there. There was no history to the house. There also, when my house was first built, it was our neighborhood was brand new and was still being developed, and it was just woods. It wasn't like there was like a graveyard or like something that happened on the land or anything. It was just woods, and then they built the house, and then my family moved in. So I just wanted to preface this story with that information. So I was about 11 years old at this time, and it had just gotten to the point where my parents would allow me to stay home alone by myself, and I was so stoked. I was like, finally, I get to be in the house by myself. I don't need to be babysat. I was so excited. And there was one night, I remember it was like a Friday night, I think, and my parents had gone out. My brother was at a friend's house, and I remember I was home alone, and by this point I have discovered the show Ghost Hunters. So I remember that night I was watching Ghost Hunters on the TV, and it was the Bobby Mackey episode. I'm not gonna get into the details of that case or anything, but there's a bunch of ghosts there as well as like a potential demon. So super haunted, very negative energy. Anyway, that's not the point. So I watched that episode, and then I remember it was like later that night I ended up going to bed. And my parents weren't home yet, and neither was my brother. It was just like, I'm tired, I'm gonna go sleep. And I remember lying in bed, and very suddenly, I kind of started feeling like someone was in the room with me. And I had never felt that before in a situation where I couldn't see where obviously I've had the feeling of being watched, but when I've had the feeling of being watched, it's something where I'll look around and someone would, of course be there, and you'd be like, oh, it's so-and-so walked into the room, whatever. But I just felt like someone was there watching me while I was lying in bed. And I was sitting there, I'm like, this can't be real. Like, I just watched a few ghost hunting shows. Like, I wasn't a kid who was like easily spooked. Even, I mean, I'm obviously not now, but especially at a young age, I was not the kid who was easily got scared of stuff. I was like, oh, this is all in your head. You just watched a ghost hunting show. For whatever reason, this episode got to you a little bit more than the other ones had. And I was like, you're fine. You've been home alone before. No one's in the house. You're just a little spooked from the episode you watched. You're fine. And then after that, it's the first time in my entire life I have ever felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. And I immediately got that, and it was just so crazy because, like I said, I never felt that sensation before. I never even fully understood what people meant when they said that they felt that. I thought it was just like the chills. Literally, I swear, my hair was fully stood up as I was lying in bed. And what happened is that it would start at my neck, and then I could feel it going down my back as well as going down my arms. It was like just like this energy just like flowing across my skin. Like I know that sounds weird, but that's the best way to describe it. I remember feeling someone specifically at the foot of my bed. And all of a sudden, it was very quiet. I heard a woman say, "Hello," at the end of my bed. I know sleep paralysis is a thing. I'm very aware. So I know that that's a real thing, and I was like, you know, you just gotta ignore it, like, you just gotta go to bed. And eventually it calmed down enough where I ended up falling asleep, and I heard my parents come in, and like they came home from wherever they were, and we moved on. And I woke up the next morning, and I was like, oh, that was really weird, you know. That was weird that happened. That's never happened to you after watching a ghost hunting show. You've never gone like that, but it is what it is. The way this haunting started is it started off very small, and then it gradually became more and more aggressive to the point where a handful of things were happening to me on a daily basis. Every night, when I was in my room alone, I would still feel that same energy. I would pick up on like the hair standing up on my back, things like that. And I kept telling myself, like, your mind's just making things up. Oh, another thing that happened at night, and like I said, this is going to be discredited because it can also be seen as, you know, a sleep paralysis situation, but I swear on everything that this really happened. So there was one night where my parents put me to bed, and I remember they were saying goodnight to me, and then they walked out of the room. And I remember the moment I had said goodnight to them, and I had like just closed my eyes, I swear that someone pulled the covers up on my bed. I remember it felt weird because it was almost like a breeze. Like it was like a gust of air, and it kind of like was like vortexy, almost like you could kind of tell that something was trying to manifest itself. And then I felt the sheets go up on my bed, and I was literally like tucked into bed. Like I literally felt the sheets come up on me, and this was immediately after I said goodnight to my parents, and I remember feeling that and then like turning over and being like, oh my god, I was just tucked into bed. And then there were some very small things that started happening. And when I say things started happening, I mean outside of my bedroom, lying in bed at night. And it started off very small, but then it got to the point where I couldn't come up with explanations anymore. And that's when I knew this was real. I had a desk in my bedroom, and the way the desk is positioned was that the desk was across from the door, and if I were to sit down at the desk, the door to my bedroom would be right behind me. And I remember sitting there one day, I was trying to do some work, and I could just feel, I had the same feeling of being watched that I have felt like in my bedroom while I was going to sleep. And it was coming from behind me because, like I said, I was sitting at the desk and like the rest of the room is behind me, so like I could feel someone behind me watching me. Tried to ignore it, you know, as usual. And all of a sudden, I heard the door to my room like slowly open. Like I heard the door open. And at first I was like, okay, well maybe I didn't fully shut the door. So maybe there was like a cross breeze or something and it opened the door. So I go back and I shut the door and then I sit back down at my desk. Then I heard, after that, I was sitting there for a few minutes and I heard the door open again and fully open. And it was at this point that I was like, I know for a fact that I fully shut the door, and like there were no issues with my doorknob to my room. Like like when it shut, it fully shut, you would hear a click. Like there were no issues with the room itself, like the door. Once I figured out what was happening, I actually really felt comforted by the spirit that was there, and like wasn't as frightened by what was going on once I understood what was happening and that this was a ghost. This was just her presenting herself to me. So I mean, I was very okay with her once I figured out that's what was happening. And it just increased from there. There were a few times where I heard her voice. Like I said, I heard it the first night, but then I heard her voice a handful of times after that. I also, she did a lot of moving around. It was early morning. I was getting ready for school. I remember walking into our dining room, and in our dining room, my brother and I would keep our papers and backpacks in there to go to school. And I remember there was one day I walked in, and like I said, I was by myself, and we have like a small chandelier in my dining room. I walked into the room and the dining room light turned on its own. And then not only did it turn on its own, but the chandelier in the dining room slowly started spinning. And like I said, it wasn't like quick, like, but it was like slowly turning. There was also a time where I remember I was with my family having dinner, and I remember feeling a hand on my shoulder while I was at dinner with my family. And the crazy thing about it was, it wasn't just like I felt a pressure on my shoulder, like I could feel like the fingers of like someone just like holding my shoulder. Throughout a majority of this going on, I didn't really talk to my parents about this because I wasn't sure if they were gonna believe me. And I didn't really talk to my brother about it either. So I was sitting at dinner and I felt this hand on my shoulder, and I just didn't say anything. I was just like, you know. So I just kind of ignored it. I could hear footsteps in our house every once in a while. That wasn't super common, but it did happen here and there. There was one time where I was home alone, and I remember hearing footsteps in my parents' room. So it got to the point where it was happening multiple times a day. I was having experiences, things like that. And I remember hearing the footsteps in my parents' room. And at this point, like, I had just decided to go upstairs. And I just checked, no one was there. But of course, I wasn't surprised because this had been like such a normalized thing. And I mean, looking back at it, I'm like, I probably should have proceeded with more caution. But it's like, oh, it's the ghost, and I just knew. So yeah, I went up there. There was no one there. I'm not surprised. One of the ones that really got me was, once again, this is a situation where I was home alone, And I walked outside. And I remember, I think I was picking something up from the mailbox. I remember walking down the driveway. And I got to the end of the driveway, and I just had this gut feeling to turn around and look at my house. And I turn around, and I look at the house, and we had a garage and garage door, all that. And our garage door, there was a button that activated it, and it was by the side door. And I remember looking at the house, it was like the button for the garage door was hit, and the garage door went down. Like, literally as I was staring at the house that was completely vacant. My parents weren't there, my brother wasn't there, no one was there at the time this happened, and the garage door just shut. But I eventually told my mom what was going on. And it was something that we started slowly kind of bringing up in conversation with my brother. And he said that there was one afternoon where he was home alone, and he said that he had heard footsteps coming down the basement stairs. And when he thought someone was home or something, and when he went to go check to see who was there, no one was there. But he heard footsteps coming down the stairs, and nothing was there. And Max was with him at the time, so it wasn't our dog. One afternoon, but I remember I left my room with like a messy bed. I didn't make my bed. Definitely didn't. And I remember I went to lacrosse, and I came back, and my bed was made. Now, here's the thing about this. I knew immediately something was off, and I could tell it was the ghost. But the one thing that really made me realize that it was off was the way that the bed was made. So typically, like when me and like my mom or like whoever would make the bed, we would make the bed and then, have the sheets first and then have the pillows on top. The way it was set up was the sheet, the top sheet went under the pillow, but then would like be tucked and then come back up and cover the pillows. I wanted to kind of like prove to my mom that, this has been happening. So I remember, I knew that she did not make my bed. And I know that obviously I sure didn't make my bed. My dad, like I said, traveled for work, and he was here for a short time during the weekends and then had to leave again. And he definitely would not make my bed for me or do something like that. And my brother, he wouldn't make a bed for me now, let alone in our like preteen years. So that was 100% not him. That would never happen. Ever. So I remember I told my mom, I was like, "Oh, Mom, thank you so much for making my bed for me. That was really nice of you." And I remember she just looked at me. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me. And then I was like, "Oh yeah, that's so sweet." Like trying to like play it off. She goes into my room and she takes a look at the bed and she just stares at it. She stares at it for a moment. And then I think, like I said, I think someone was also home with us. It might have been my brother, but like there was some change in topic where we moved on, and my mom just looked at the bed and then just walked out of my room. And I remember later that day, I was like getting something from the kitchen. The TV room was next door, and like I ended up going up to my room. And as I was going upstairs, I heard my mom talking to my brother, and they were talking about my bed. And my mom was like trying to keep it casual and not like get too freaked out by it. And I remember my brother turned to her and she was like, "Can ghosts make beds?" And she was like, I don't know. Once I started acknowledging the presence of this ghost woman, I remember that the activity slowly subsided. And there was one day in my room where like I didn't feel like super sad, but I felt a little bit of sadness. And I remember hearing, at this point, I mean, I don't know, but I heard someone say goodbye. And it was a woman's voice, and she said goodbye. Like she seemed kind of sad. And then it was around that point that all activity just stopped. I think she had really good intentions behind being there, and I think the reason the haunting became so aggressive is I think she was just determined to have me acknowledge her. Yeah, that was my first ghost experience. If you believe me, awesome. If you don't, I hope you at least have fun with this video. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. I hope you guys are all having a happy holidays. And I hope you all have a good new year. If you like this and want to see more, subscribe. We are doing some more ghost hunting. We just recently did a investigation at the Hotel Utica. I'm still working on getting that out. So yeah, there is some more to come in the new year in regards to content, and I hope you have a happy holidays and a happy new year, and I can't wait to see you guys then. Take care.